All right. Again, welcome everyone. Because we've officially pressed record, folks in the YouTube sphere have no idea what happened prior to the record button being pressed. So we just set some ground rules. We just got oriented. So welcome to Open Wednesdays, where we're focusing on political and financial education for our members and guests, and co-creating and co-leading together in this particular space. And so for this month, every month we particularly focus on feasibility studies. This month in particular, our topic and theme are coffee shops. And so we have Representative and if I mispronounce your name, please forgive me. Is it Rokia? Rokia. Oh my goodness. Rokia from Dudley Cafe, definitely a fan, who's here. And then we also have a small format PVD based out of Providence. And so they are hopefully joining us relatively soon. And so, but for right now, yeah, and I'll actually read what's in the chat as well. I have this on a different screen, but this is easier. So thank you, Sierra. Small Format is a Providence-based queer cooperative run open air gallery and exhibition room that offers a mood bar, cafe, and snackery. And so I'm looking forward to learning a little bit more about that space and their impact. And I think we can go ahead and start for now with Dudley Cafe. Feel free to jump on in. And then we also have like associated questions as well, which we can also provide both verbally and through the chat, unless you're familiar and have all the questions ready to go. But feel free to jump on in.
Would you like me to just kind of say a little bit about how we, how we came to be and things like that, and then you would just ask questions?
Yes, we can. Sierra, I know you've got your mute off. You want to just jump in?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, if you could quickly introduce yourself for people that haven't heard of Dudley Cafe. We have a lot of YouTube subscribers that will be, excited to learn if they're outside of Boston. And then, yeah, how the cafe got started.
Okay. So I'm Rokia Chaudhry from Dudley Cafe. So my husband and I first opened Dudley Cafe in 2015. We had been living a walking distance from what is Nubian Square for quite some time. And my husband used to have a real estate office in the square as well previous to that. And we are also, we own and manage some Indian restaurant in Boston area as well called Shanti, which is located in Dorchester neighborhood of Boston, and then Rosendale neighborhood of Boston as well at that time. And we used to always work out of the square and kind of were like really miss like more of gathering spaces in the square there, where we could meet up for a little meeting with someone, or even our friends from another neighborhood wanted to come, or they'll always be like asking us to go there, like to go to JP or go to like South End, but like we couldn't say, oh, come meet me in the square at that time, Dudley Square, like meet us here. And we didn't have any experience in coffee shop. We had experience in restaurant setting, but we, because we spent so much time in the square, we understood that this space doesn't need a Indian cuisine restaurant. This space needs more gathering spaces. Those are like kind of the igniters of where neighbors and small entrepreneurs can really network, or even just run into your neighbor and kind of be a conversation starter for anyone just running, that those are like the best places where, if, my favorite thing at Dudley Cafe before the pandemic used to be just like walking in and just hearing all like the buzzing conversation. Like that's where like a lot of like those things happen, which is a coffee shop for neighborhoods. And that's why we kind of like took on this, that, oh, this is what the square needs, is more spaces like this where people in neighborhood people could have option of getting healthy food, having like warm safe space to meet for a little meeting. If entrepreneurs, they're not they're working out of their home, but they want like a setting to meet their client, or just like networking, or just meeting your neighbor down the street for some coffee right there. So that's kind of was like kind of our vision on why we started that journey of Dudley Cafe. And so one of the other thing is that, we know like living and working in this neighborhood, a lot of times like we're waiting for others to like fill a lot of like these voids, or businesses or things that we want, businesses or services that we want in our neighborhood, but then we wait for someone else. So that's kind of where it's like, I think like we could also try to put in, I know we don't have experience in coffee shop, but I think we could create a plan and fill that void. And because we also want to be customer of that particular business, because we miss the existence of more of those business in the square. And so like, well, if somebody has to do it, so may as well be us, and we take the step forward to do that and create a plan.
Thank you for that. Sierra, should we just introduce Tamika, and then we'll go back and forth, and we'll kind of just do general Q&A? Perfect. Hi, Tamika. Good to see you. You're on mute, by the way. And so we're gonna invite you to talk a little bit more about small format, and share a little bit more about how it was started, how it came to be. And then after this, we're gonna follow up with some questions for both organizations.
Cool. Yeah, so small format started what feels like forever ago, because it was kind of a lifetime ago, and for many of us. I signed a lease about 2 years ago for small format. And yeah, it kind of came to be as I guess doing a lot of creative culture events. There's definitely like a need for space to be held for that community to have like consistent access for creators, for community engagement. Like that felt necessary. Like it was time for holding that space. And so yeah, I kind of thought, hell, like there's a lot of interest in this, and I think that if someone takes a leap, folks will kind of come together to make this happen. And I am really grateful to say that is kind of what happened. I kind of fondly like call it my girl gang. Like it was so many different people that came together to make small format a reality. From the jump there, it's been like, there are so many things that no one tells you with starting a small business. And yeah, there's just people of specifically like femmes have just come out of the woodwork to put in their time and energy and to like kind of dream together to push this into reality. So yeah, Small Format is centered around queer creative culture, creating space that every 8 to 10 weeks we show new, I say this, also I just wanted to clarify, we've only been open for 6 damn months. So it is kind of evolved from 2 years ago to now, in so many ways, because of the pandemic. It is very uniquely affected by being a business that opened during a pandemic. And so, yeah, we are showing new art shows every 8 to 10 weeks. Very excited to have had a few events now. So able to do some small performance, being able to do, there's currently a exhibit that's on display that's like a call and response. The questions of the install change weekly, and it allows the public to respond. It's specifically coming from a zine that is centering the creative practice of BIPOC folks in the face of climate change. And so allowing how can we build our capacity for resiliency and community care. And so it is, yeah. Also, we serve cocktails, we serve coffee. Yeah, we have like, I'm really excited about this summer. You know, we have new farms getting involved, you know, being able to have access to, really grateful being able to have access to, you know, smaller farms here in Rhode Island. It's a little different. It's a little, you know, it's a very densely populated small state. There are a lot of like smaller farms that are popping up right now. And so we're really excited to be working with more and more farms, and being able to offer just some really cool stuff here moving into the summer. So yeah, happy to kind of like talk more specifically about any of that, but that's a general overview of what we got going on.
Awesome. So, and I guess I'll just go ahead and lead with some questions, and I'll invite folks to jump in. And I typically like to just ask questions based on some of your responses, and so I'm just gonna throw a couple out there. And just to start, for both of you, and I know you, Tamika, just spoke to this a little bit, but if you can delve a little bit more, you both kind of spoke to this need in the community, and I'm just going to make the assumption that you're not as familiar with Ujima in our assembly process, and the fact that we actually invite our community to tell us a little bit more about what their needs are. And there's a vote on those particular needs. And that's how a lot of our feasibility studies come to be, which then in turn leads us to this conversation here. And so, and connecting the dots, can you share a little bit more about, because one of the things we want to talk about is how did the business come to be from the nuts and bolts? But before we do that, how would you characterize or explain the need and the importance of community and really kind of starting the business in general? And we'll start with Dudley Cafe.
You mean like how we went from, you know, identifying that to starting the business?
How do you go about identifying the business? And then second, all the people that help kind of put it together, those that are paid and unpaid, whether it's church groups or family members, just community as you would define it. And yeah. I'm going to turn my video off just for a second.
Yeah. So I guess, you know, for us living and working here, we had access to a lot of our neighbors, a lot of people. So used to, you know, my husband was in real estate, so a lot of like transaction was happening, and people who were coming into the square for those businesses, but didn't have like place like, so we were able to like collect a lot of like feedback on what they're looking for when they come to the square, for either to for the transportation, or either they're coming to a specific task, to complete a specific task in the square here, or they're just like our neighbors who say that, oh, we always pass by the square and never see that there is a spot, like enough spots for us to be actually stopping. So we did gather a lot of like those data, but we at that time we probably didn't formalize it into something, but we we kind of collected a lot of like those feedback, and then took that information. And when City of Boston was putting out RFP for the Bruce C. Bowling building and saying they're interested in getting retail spaces in there. And so that's where before that building thing started to happen, we were thinking of that, oh, this is what the square needs. And then when that kind of started to come along, and that's when we spoke with the neighborhood department of the city and the economic development, who were engaged on it, on if there will be like process for local businesses who want to participate in this. And then we were instructed, there will be an RFP process that will be coming out, and that what our vision is. We put RFP together and we submitted that, and then that went through a committee. There was a committee form a community-based committee form that went through those RFPs and kind of went through that and did the selection process. And that's how the original businesses who opened in 2015 in that building, which were us, Dudley Cafe, Final Touch, at that time, Tasty Burger, and then the Uptown Street, and then Dudley Dough as well. So that kind of was our process for that. And then as far as funding, we worked with a little bit with the city, and then as well as we worked with a small local bank. At that time, it used to be Meeting House Bank in Dorchester, and since then they have been bought by East Boston Savings. But at that time, we always do our banking with local banks only. And so they were the partner who took on chances with us and had, worked with us to give us a loan to open a Dudley Cafe, part of it. And it was, it was a loan that they held on in-house. So just to explain to a lot of people who are not familiar with, when you're getting loans from banks, a lot of your mortgage loans, small business loans are, kind of sold off to the market, and other bigger corporations or bigger banks buy those loans. But because this was a neighborhood where we opened a business, and restaurant and cafe business is very, very tough, and the margins are so slim. So traditional banks, it's very difficult to get funding out of them. And the only reasons that bank worked with us, because we were a small company who worked with this small bank for a lot of our businesses, and they took that chance with us, and they held on to this loan as part of their internal portfolio and did not put it out there, because they would not be able to sell it, because we are located in Nubian Square, So, but that is probably, those were some of the things that we were like, wow, it was, we really appreciated that, but it also opened our eyes on a lot of things about how difficult it really is to or get funding for small businesses and in neighborhoods like ours.
Thank you for that.
And and then, yeah, so that
And
was very teaching moment for us for that.
I can imagine. I can imagine. And so as we transition over to Tamika in small format, um, you can feel free to speak to the community piece. Sierra had also posted a question in here as well. Whether or not can you talk about why you needed to create the hybrid business model instead of a normal cafe?
Yeah, so I'd be happy to speak to both. So I guess I'll start a little just like the original question there. I think it's really interesting for me to pretend that I know anything sometimes. Like I'm constantly hearing people and finding that realizing I know less and less all the time, or that there's more and more to know. So when I say that I identified this, like saw this need in the community, it was really just through the experience of hearing so many people trying to book creative events, music related, art related, queer events, and having to go to spaces that didn't feel safe for them, compromised a lot of what they wanted and needed, worked so damn hard and never got the check at the end, didn't get a cut off the bar or any like those sort of things. But just to be able to hold that space, their willingness, and not just them, like I've worked many hours doing that myself, and so identifying that like we need a space for us was very much like centered around a certain socioeconomic group, a certain like group of queer folks, and folks that were working toward building collective capacity for care, and that needed just a damn table to do that at, without having to jump through these fire hoops. So that was like the identifying like the community, the need was like being a part of having pulled off some crazy things to be able to just have an event, and so that was kind of like identifying that, and also specifically like speaking like this kind of I think segues nicely into like the hybrid model. Part of the reason for having the space being open during the day is I think it's really important that, especially as queer folks, we oftentimes find ourselves in only having gatherings at night over loud music, at bars, that sort of thing. Those are the only spaces that are, queer spaces oftentimes, are drinking spaces, are spaces not necessarily where there's a lot of ability to get to know people. I mean, like I get to know people in the dark a very different way than I am when I'm breaking, literal bread with them. And so having a space that could offer both of those things, could offer the capacity for you to actually sit and like talk to someone. And then also on the flip side of that, like, there's a stage, there is a space for performance, and there's that ability to like turn over, to be also that place for celebration when you do not want to talk to anyone, because we all need that too. We all need those spaces to just let our bodies experience our environments without the confines of language. And so that was kind of the interest in having this hybrid space, that allowed for, you can get a cocktail, and you can also, like, I specifically cater to like I have a mood bar, so drinks that are mood altering, that are not based around alcohol, because firstly, well, alcohol hasn't done as many amazing things for our community as we would hope. It and it tends to be something people turn to, not just in celebration, but also as, a way to cope with the world. And so offering that hybrid space, offering the mood bar that everyone deserves to be able to kind of have themselves moved away from whatever that is going on in the world around them to get a little bit of relief. And so that's where the mood bar kind of came in, was like offering that other alternative to get that kind of reprieve. So that includes things like medicinal herbs, skullcap, things as simple as lavender, damiana, CBD, products like that are mostly used for anti-anxiety, similar to how a lot of people will use alcohol, and especially in a social situation. So yeah, and the hybrid space also was specifically because it's really hard to make it as as just a cafe. And this is because food costs continue to rise, especially during the pandemic. Things like gloves used to cost, $30 a case. They're like $90 a case now. Having that option, like I want it to be accessible. You can come in and buy that $2 coffee. Also, the way we actually can hold the space is those people who are wanting to and able to pay like $7 to $11 for a cocktail. There's there's a different margin on those sort of things that allows for us to, at the end of the day, like, pay the landlord, pay the insurance, all of those sort of things. And so those hybrid, that, it's twofold. And it also allows for me to do things like, I am buying, like the meat that I'm buying is, ethically raised. It's those sort of things. Like there's a lot less profit margin on that sort of thing. But I am also not wanting to charge, $12 for a breakfast sandwich. That's absurd. I want this to be a space. You can't actually say it's an inclusive space if not everyone can come. And so, having the alcohol side kind of does like offset those sort of things, and allows for us to buy more like smaller, more cage free, those sort of things. And then with the art side, it was specifically like, well, people aren't buying art. I previously, like before this, was working on a cryptocurrency based in art, and it was to create an alternative economy based on art. Well, it turns out that it's something crazy low. Like at the time, it was like $76 a year is what like the average household was spending on art, and that included things like cinema. And we all know a movie ticket is like $12, And so where people are able to, are willing to invest their money is not always in art. And so people might go and look at it, but they're not necessarily buying it. And the gallery model doesn't work. Especially like, an art opening, we think about like, working as a director, I would see the gallery shell out like about $1,000 for an opening, between wine and snacks and, you have to get special licensing for that sort of thing, special insurance for the event, et cetera, et cetera. And you then have to sell quite, depending on where, like the price range of the work you're selling, you better sell half the show to break even, or you need to be aiming at buying, having buyers that are rolling in, and able to buy a $30,000 piece. And again, then we ask ourselves again about accessibility. Like, does that, like, who can come into this, who feels invited into the space if we're not bringing in a variety of art, some in which is economically accessible to more people, to people that have that $12 to spend on art that day. Like, I want to have something for those folks too, because they absolutely, like, yeah, we all deserve to have art in our lives and be able to engage with it. So yeah, that's kind of the hybrid piece, and kind of the how we're thinking about community, how yeah, and as far as like paid and unpaid labor, that's, yeah, no one on the team has yet to be paid. Really, well, that's not true. I'm really grateful to say that I just started being able to pay people, which feels amazing to like say. But yeah, it's you know, really working at doing that $15 an hour. Yeah, it's things are looking up. So we're able to, I'm offering trades a lot of the time. So doing things like, I'll give you a food tab for your labor, that sort of thing. I got a couple of grants that allowed me to have access to some technology. So I was able to, you know, doing trades like that, figuring out like, hey, can I, you know, I walked my friend's dog, you know, as like payment, that sort of thing. So that is how we have been making it work. You know, I've met some fantastic people. I waited for a sandwich in line one time. It was like, buy one sandwich, get the second sandwich free at this like local place here. And I waited an hour for the sandwich, which I'll never do again, first time. But I met an electrician during this hour. I ended up working with him. He saw the vision. He saw that I was working, you know, working a normal, I was serving, bartending, etc., to give him cash every time he came through. And he worked out like a great deal with us, those sort of things. So there have been some nice moments like that. And yeah, that's.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
So we've heard a lot on both ends, and because we've got the traditional model on one end and we have a hybrid on the other. And we heard a little bit more about traditional banking and financing and loan packaging. And then, you know, this agreement that there's not enough margins in the cafe model or just the food business in general to really kind of just really get profitability. So I just want to slow down a little bit and go back. So for respectively for your businesses, what was the startup cost? Because oftentimes when people come into the space, it's like, this is great, but what does it look like for me to start something similar to that with my own characteristics, with my own signature? And so if you both can just like really quickly kind of just offer, what is it, you know, what is your startup cost? What's the square footage that covers? And a little bit more about the challenges with financing as it relates to that. We can start with Dudley Cafe.
Okay. So our startup cost was around that's with construction of the space, and then all like the professionals that needed for that, and then all the training and everything. Our startup cost was around $400,000 for Dudley Cafe, and that's about 2,000 square footage space, and yeah, yes, and we would say we did traditional funding of about 150,000 of that, and then 50,000 from there was a small city loan, and then the rest was investment from my husband and I. And so, but you know, we would say, like, we know we were lucky enough to be in a position where we had other businesses that we could kind of lean in for this, and then, and you know, even after the opening, you know, we have reinvested like substantial amounts as we said, like, you know, just the struggle with figuring out the, you know, the margins and making sure, like, you know, we are paying living wage, and then finding the balance of like what can we charge and still be accessible, and finding that balance has you know, that's where like we are always like trying to figure out where is like that sweet spot, and you know, we could still have it accessible, still be able to pay like living wages for our staff, and still purchase quality product and offer healthy product, you know. And that's something like is a continuing process of learning. And if, you know, and that's kind of like, you know, just like like gone up even more trying to figure that out during this time. But I would say like that this time has taught me a lot of things about my own business that I had throughout, like trying to put out fires every day, had not had time to like learn. You know, now I was forced to face it and learn it. And now I would say like that is like one of my silver lining for this is really, I would say like now I got to really understand the nitty gritty, some of the stuff that I just was so busy in the day to day to like take the time to learn it or dive into it. But now I would say that, you know, I know a lot more, and I feel like I'm grasping it better, understanding some of those things, and I'm hopeful that I will be able to utilize those lessons learned from this.
I'm sure you will. I'm sure you will. I mean, come on, that's like finance and like and growth strategy. That's a lot.
Yeah, we were actually at the end of 2018. Me personally, as you know, owner operator, was going through a strategic plan of the next phase for us, what that looks like, and some of the things that we were working on, you know, now for Dudley Cafe, like now we have to basically start from scratch, because over the 5 years that the sales we had built up, the revenue and the different places that we were pulling in that to sustain this have now kind of crashed, and we are basically having to start from like 10% now, you know. So that's now that strategic plan that we work on, it's, you know, you put it to the side, and now we kind of are looking at plans that we you know, things that we were doing in the beginning in the business plan, like, okay, we have to look at that, like we have to reignite basically like reopening and like this new business, you know.
Gotcha. And then there's a question for you specifically, and I'm going to ask that you hold, because I want to pose the same question to Tamika. But the question is, you know, what advice would you give your younger self? And so, you know, if you can kind of hold that response just a second, Tamika, in terms of startup costs, what were your startup costs, and what were some of the challenges in really kind of raising that?
Yeah, so my startup costs were around $80K, and that's for 500 square feet. So I started with $15K in private investment, and then I don't come from a position of like having had a traditional a background in facilitating a lot of financial literacy. So I wasn't in a position at the time to take a loan. I was working, you know, a couple of jobs and sort of living as modestly as I could to after that 15K ran out, and it ran out quickly. Like 15K is kind of nothing when you are starting a business. Yeah, it really became how to make this work. And you know, some of the things I really came up against is just no one really tells you a lot of if you do things in a particular order, you save yourself a lot of time, which is a lot of money and a lot of energy. And so, you know, yeah, retrospectively, I'm like, damn, if I had filed for that permit first, or, you know, that sort of thing, I'm like, I would have, you know, had I, there are certain things like, I hope that everyone knows this, but not every landlord is renting the property at, well, at legal code. And so you may, you know, you rent into this sort of thing. And that can be that was one of the hugest hurdles to start, was really the code issue, and kind of having to figure out how to navigate. You don't have as many rights specifically as a commercial tenant. You have, yeah, a lot less rights to getting folks to meet you halfway. Halfway would be a desirable place, I'd say, but like it was, you know, that retrospectively, I will never do that again. If I could bellow this into any entrepreneur, I always say, like, I can't wait to tell, you know, I had initially contacted several other folks that I knew who owned businesses, and they didn't make the time to meet with me about this. And I can't wait till someone contacts me. I'm gonna let them know, you know, if you're thinking about doing this seriously, here's what I did that really was costly, and or like, here's what to look out for, because there are just slight nuances of order of time, of just like how to look at things. You don't know until you've done it. You know, and so, yeah, those sort of things kind of impeded, and that is also why it took so long to actually get done the renovations. There are certain things like having to get, you know, special fire code modifications, you know, that requires, yeah, a hearing. You have to, if you don't know that, you might file for a different permit that they take 3 months, or, you know, they have up to 6 weeks to admit, and then they have like another 6 weeks to actually send out someone to make sure that you actually do have the permit, and then they will tell you you really need to actually do this other hearing. And so there are things like that, that it was, yeah, it slowed things down, and rent, you know, the initial like rent and those sort of costs don't stop. And so, yeah, that was a lot of it. Having just some kind of order, and some sort of willingness to like continuously show your face at City Hall. You gotta, yeah, that's a lot of it. So
I appreciate that. Thank you so much. And thank you both. And so I'm going to give the response the opportunity to kind of speak to what advice you'd give your younger self, but you know, I'm looking at time and in our transition, and I don't want to rush either one of you, but I do want to ask a final question, because I think usually the last questions are usually what you would tell your younger self. I'm wondering, what affirmation would you give your younger self in terms of what did you do well, you know, leading up to this point, that has contributed to your overall success? What did you do well? So less so about what you didn't do well and what you could have learned, but what did you do well in those moments? Because we also cannot miss the fact that you obviously did something well because you're here. So we'll do Dudley Cafe, and then we'll move on to small format to kind of close it out.
Do you still want to do the just affirmation and not what I'm gonna say to my younger self?
Both, because you didn't get the opportunity
Let's do
to.
it quick. The reason you have like seen a pattern with me today about talking about finances is that is what I would have like told my younger self, is like pay more attention to that, pay what every single dollar that's coming in and going out. And that is why you keep like hearing me say that now, because I'm like, it's so important to be on top of that all the time. So that's kind of like you. So now you kind of like see what I already kind of addressed that with myself. But affirmation be, being able to open a space and be able to like walk into that space, connecting with the right people, partnering with the right people that had brought it to life. And brought it to this, buzzing community hub. Like that's what I would have to say. Like that used to like always like put a smile on my face every time I went in there for morning coffee, is seeing and hearing all those conversations. I would say like that. Just connecting and partnering with the right people who also like understood the vision and helped me, paid or non-paid, to me and my husband to bring it to that picture where you guys got to experience that.
Thank you. Tamika?
My younger self, I think I also like would kind of piggyback on that. I would tell my younger self to take out a freaking credit card and to pay it. Just like that simple, like just take it out, even though you've been told that credit cards are awful. Like it is actually how this works. You gotta show them that you're gonna pay, and so do that, and stick with it. That just that simple. Just tell my younger self that, because it will building a portfolio of diversified debt is really what it is, right? Like and showing that you are going to pay it off is essential. I mean, I just celebrated my 30th birthday. Like I signed this lease when I was 27. I didn't at that time, that was when I was getting my first credit card. Like I think so the earlier the better. Like get at it. You can do it. Yeah. And as far as affirmations, that I think thank you for being vulnerable. Like I think I would like thank, look, if I'm giving myself an affirmation, looking at myself and like thanking myself for doing something well. This is all the connections that you're making, the trust that you're putting in the people around you. It is so scary. That kind of vulnerability. And there are times when, you want to do it all yourself, or, shut down. But like, thank you for, being vulnerable and like believing in the process, or even when you didn't believe, like, continuing in the process. So yeah, positive affirmation, that would be mine.
Perfect. Well, thank you both. Thank you both for joining us. As you can see, there's a flux of folks coming in preparation for our transition, our member teams. I'm going to stop sharing with YouTubers. And so thank you to the YouTube world. And